Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for our Knowledge Lab webinar on managing technology and mental wellness as we face a new normal. My name is Khaled Hassanein, and I am a professor of information systems at the DeGroote School of Business. I'm also the director of the McMaster Digital Transformation Research Center and the Associate Dean Graduate Studies and Research. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Wabanaki nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We are always thrilled to see people joining these webinars from all over North America and the world, so thank you for continuing to support DeGroote and our programming. We have a very interesting topic lined up for you today, one that affects all of us one way or another, and something that has played a critical role in how we work during this pandemic. Dr. Natasha Sharma is with us today to talk about the link between technology and its ability to either support or worsen our mental health. Dr. Sharma is an internationally recognized authority on the psychology of relationships, motivation, and emotional wellness. She is the owner of NKS Therapy, creator of the bestseller The Kindness Journal, and co-creator of The 8-Hour Therapist. Her current focus is on turning complex psychological concepts into simple and effective tools that allow people to apply these concepts in their everyday's life. Moderating this panel today is my colleague, Dr. Catherine Connolly, who is a professor and area chair of the Human Resources and Management area at the DeGroote School of Business, and one of our alumni as well. Dr. Connolly holds a Canada Research Chair Tier 2 in Organizational Behavior and is a member of the College of New Scholars of the Royal Society of Canada. Catherine's research focuses on the attitudes, behavior, and experiences of non-standard workers, the effects of leadership styles on leader well-being, and knowledge hiding in organizations. Dr. Connolly also conducts applied research with several Canadian organizations in both the private and non-for-profit sectors. In addition to her research successes, Catherine is a past winner and frequent teaching award nominee for her teaching in the MBA and PhD programs. Thank you both for being here today, and we look forward to hearing your insights on today's topic. Catherine, I will now turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Khaled. I would just like to welcome everyone and note that there's just a few minor housekeeping items that I just want to mention before we really start. And so the first thing is there will actually be a Q&A period at the end of our webinar. And we've already received some excellent questions from participants, but there's still time. So as we're starting to go through the different questions that we have for Natasha, if you have your own questions, just let us know, and then there'll be a few minutes at the end for us to have a broader discussion on your suggested topics as well. Okay, and I should also note that the session will be recorded, and it's just because we're so fortunate to have Natasha with us, so it'd be nice to share it more broadly. If you have any questions about that, please contact the marketing team, and I'm sure they could connect you with your own copy so that you can watch it again if you want, or send it to others. It should be no problem. And the last thing is we're hoping to get a little bit of feedback from you about the webinar, just so it can help a little bit with the planning for the next one. So after the session, you'll have an email with a few questions, and I hope you get an opportunity to send those back to us when you get a chance. Okay, so with all that, I guess we'll just start our questions for Natasha. So maybe a kind of a preliminary question would be about you, actually. And you've had such an interesting, multifaceted career. Maybe you could share just a little bit with us about kind of how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here as well. It's my pleasure to be here and speak today. I didn't come into my profession in a linear fashion, actually. I did my undergrad in business at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster, which was a fantastic experience. But if I'm being completely honest, I did that because I actually had no clue what I wanted to do, which is a very common thing, much more common than people realize at that age. And I figured it would be a way for me to contemplate while at the same time having some prospects to establish a livelihood afterwards. And I joined the corporate world following the completion of my degree for a number of years, about 4 or 5, I think, in total. And I actually knew, if I think back now from where I am, I think I knew within the first 3 weeks, if not sooner, that something wasn't right for me. And I worked for some very large Canadian and international organizations, including one abroad, where I actually moved to London in England and spent 2 years working for a very large cosmetics company, that in a role that kind of, to borrow a line from a movie, a million girls would kill to have this role, truly on paper. I won't bore you with the details, but it was glamorous. And I just knew, I kind of gave it the old, try for a number of years, but for me, it didn't suit my strengths. I think that was very important, of wanting to contribute in a different way and really help people. But I also didn't, the lifestyle didn't suit me. And I think we're going to be talking a lot today about why. I was never a morning person, but it was also the idea of I felt like I was constantly responding to my life. I'd wake up just responding in that corporate environment, the typical corporate environment. And this was 2002 or 3 through 8. So it wasn't a whole long time ago. It was, it wasn't very recent. This was a while ago. So then I actually left and came back home from England and did kind of a lot of reflection, and eventually went back to graduate school. And from there, I realized it clicked very well, and kind of brings me up here today, from working in someone's practice to sort of beginning my own ventures. And it really snowballed from there, but it was a good fit for me. And it's been a completely different experience. But what was really interesting is that early part, exposure to the corporate world and how it was in various organizations, has really informed what we're going to be talking about today, and in a lot of ways as well. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for kind of laying the foundation for what we're going to hear a little bit more about your views on these things. So I guess as you're talking, I was starting to think a little bit about this focus on technology, that it's top of mind for everybody now, but I'm also wondering, is this really something that's new based on your experiences? What do you think about that?
So I don't think what's going on with respect to our hopefully heightened awareness on what our relationship is with technology, I don't think it's a new thing. I think this year, being in the year of the pandemic, hopefully maybe the only year, but it's not looking that way, has only accelerated really what was already writing on the wall long before the pandemic. So the pandemic has accelerated the use of technology, some of it in very good ways. And that was a point I want to make, is that technology isn't inherently all bad, and it's not inherently all good, like most things in life, but it is helping us in many ways. But there's a few ways that I think we have not paid close attention to, or really been kept abreast of as consumers, as a society, as to what exactly our current relationship with technology is having on us. And if I had to sort of really pinpoint the real issue, or sort of one of the primary issues, is a couple of points in the timeline come to my mind. One is sort of the 80s, the early 80s, where deregulation, financial deregulation and globalization, commercial globalization really exploded. And that created a working life and working world, particularly here in North America, that drastically changed from even the way it had been for the 100 years previous to that, or even the 20 years previous to that. And then, we sort of chugged along, continuing at a pace up until somewhere around 2008 is the other point in the timeline that I pinpoint, where the acceleration of the pace of our lives just skyrocketed. And 2008, a couple interesting things happened in 2008 with Wall Street and the downturn of the stock market. But more interestingly, that is when the smartphone and social media really became something that, 2 billion plus people in the world had access to on a daily basis. Prior to that, even though we had computers and computer games and the internet, we didn't have it sort of in our back pocket, and we certainly didn't have social media at that time. So that's another turning point that drastically changed the pace of our lives. So there's sort of three themes I think about when I talk about technology and wellness: the pace of our lives, the way we consume it, and our cultural lifestyle, which is a little bit, that third piece is separate. That is what separates us, I think, from the rest of the world, because the first two are quite universal concepts. It's the third one that is unique where we are here in North America. And if I could maybe elaborate on each one of these.
Yeah, if you could, please.
So if I talk about the first item, which is the pace of our lives, it's extremely fast. It's faster than it has ever been in the history of our time. And it's faster during this webinar that we're having right now than it was this morning when we had our morning coffee. It's faster tonight when we're playing with our kids or just unwinding with a glass of wine and a movie on Netflix. It's faster. It's going to be faster then than it is right now. And I say that to illustrate the incredible speed at which things are going on behind, that we're not privy to be able to see in terms of what's being created and what's advancing by the companies who are creating these things. So what does all that mean? Well, we have become a society where we have constant competition for our attention, constant competition for our focus, demanding us to process and sort through stimuli at a speed we've never done before. So the world around us has changed quite drastically, as I've said, but what's interesting is that our human brain has not actually changed in the same proportion. Certainly our processing ability, if you think of a human brain having one component of our intellect and our cognitive abilities is processing speed, much like the processing chip of a computer, which is 1,000 times faster, if not more, than ours. We haven't risen to the same level of speed in order to match this current environment around us. And so that's sort of the first point. And what impact does that have when we are living in it, sort of ill-equipped mentally, unfortunately, is that we are stressed and there's a cognitive load on us. We are constantly sorting through stimuli. We're navigating that. We're managing all these competing demands, from phones lighting up, from emails to Netflix being on, to combined with all the other aspects of our lives, which are already demanding. So children, if you have them, other things that we are involved in. So it's just a lot mentally for us to deal with. The second one is that, so this is kind of something that I hope will not be new to a lot of listeners, but maybe it will be. And it's the idea that, if I could be a little tongue-in-cheek, I'm a rampant drug user. And Catherine, I'm sure you are too. And I'm sure everyone listening out there is
I don't know if we're going to get into all that on this call.
A rampant drug user. And let me explain. Yes, I use drugs.
Yes, please explain.
Well, first of all, I drink plenty of coffee and I do eat sugar on occasion. But I use the internet, as we all do, and I use social media. Now, my social media use, if anyone cares to know, I can elaborate at the end. I won't bore you with the details, but I use it quite consciously and intentionally. But technology is the world's mostly unregulated drug that exists in the world, and particularly now since the invention of the smartphone, and so specifically smartphone, email, social media apps. There's I'm not talking about medical technologies and early technologies that really advanced our lives, like the telephone. That's a form of technology, even though it's so old. I'm talking about specifically email, social media, all these distractions that offer us what we call variable rewards. So our human mind is unfortunately very weak in this regard. It's got lots of strengths, you know, as a psychologist, I'm a huge believer in that, of course, but in this regard, we are very weak, generally speaking. We're not designed well when it comes to willpower, especially in the face of something that is so tantalizing as what email and the internet, and particularly the way we consume the internet and social media today, which offers what we call a variable reward schedule. So the brain is receiving likes and hearts and notifications and push notifications, and it's being done very strategically at certain times such that we are rewarded intermittently, which keeps us engaged and wanting more and more and more. So this concept that I'm talking about is quite frightening when you think about it. It's not frightening on the daily because we don't see the effects of it, you know, in black and white in front of our faces. But what's actually happening, and this is now starting to come out into the open. There is a documentary on Netflix that many people may have watched called The Social Dilemma. And if you haven't watched it, everyone needs to put this on their watch list. And because it is, I mean, some of the things they talk about in that, it felt very surreal watching it because it was things that I had been speaking about for months and years prior to that. This idea that behind the scenes, we are the product as users of technology. It's not so much our data and everything that's being collected, it's us, it's our attention that is being sold and mobilized and harnessed and utilized. And to what end, on the impact on us as the users. There has been a huge lack of moral responsibility on the part of the tech companies responsible for things like email and social media. So that's the second piece. And again, that's universal. And we're growing up in this. I mean, as adults, maybe not fully, but think of those people out there who have children. I have children, 4 and 7. They are growing up with this from day one, and their whole world in many ways, sometimes if I try and float up and out of it, the way we live in many ways is very odd. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more later. But the third, I want to move on to the third thing, because this is a very long answer, which is less universal. So those first two things, the pace of life and the fact that technology is an extremely addictive concept that none of us, like not even the best psychologists, not even the best trained, you know, individuals without conscious effort are free from that. The third thing is cultural lifestyle. And I do think this is where we differ in North America, say, from other countries. So we all have technology. We all have smartphones. I mean, not all, about 2 billion, I think it's about 2 billion of us approximately have access to these things. So are we all consuming it the same way? Do we all have the same relationship with technology? Not at all. So I know many people listening might not like to hear me say this, but here in Canada, I view our social structure and our systems in government to be very, very social, very pro-social, very community oriented, and very, very almost like, you know, very similar to aligned with the European way. However, we are much more like our southerly neighbors when it comes to the way in which we work and the way in which workplaces, not entirely, but just more similar. And we still have here in North America and in Canada, to a perhaps slightly lesser degree, but nevertheless, a culture and a zeitgeist that is built around rewarding burnout and rewarding busyness. And we've glamorized it, you know, being busy and overworked used to be a sign of not really being successful in life. Like, you know, if you were working too hard and too long, then something went wrong. Like, we all have to eat and live. So there's a portion of time in life where you want to buckle down and work hard. But we've rewarded this burnout culture, I think, to the point where it's become a badge of honor. And that is extremely different from other places in the world. And those who have traveled will likely have come face to face with that. So just to give you an idea of some statistics, 40% of Canadians have reported feeling exhaustion or burnout. And this is prior to the pandemic. I'm actually not sure what that figure would be, up or down or the same now. I've had different opinions on that. And 40% report feeling anxiety. And that anxiety is less about fear of specific things or phobias or being afraid of flying or this or that, or just kind of general queasy. I think that that anxiety figure comes from this navigation of our crazy, busy world, partially which is imposed on us and partially which we bring upon ourselves, which has caused the anxiety, which is really more of a, I'm spread too thin, I'm burnt out, I'm detached, I can't focus, I can't even be present wherever I am, even for a second. So that's a very long answer. I promise my other answers will be shorter, but
okay, but I'm actually going to ask you to elaborate on your elaboration, if that's okay. Because I see we have a very good question from the listeners. And so Mona Zanhur is asking, okay, until this industry gets regulated, let's hope, and she's talking about the social media industry. So what are some of the behaviors, knowing that we're kind of weak in the face of this engineering, okay, so what can we use to effectively break that cycle of social media engagement or over-engagement?
So I think it's not enough for us to just rely solely on willpower. Because as I've said, and as a mental health and emotional expert, we are designed weak in this area. It doesn't mean we can't learn to overcome and do better, but we are sort of fundamentally, all of us, rather weak in the area of willpower. But nevertheless, it's part of it. So I think we have to be very selective with social media, and social media is not inherently bad. It is, I think, how we use and consume it, and also how much of the day. I don't know how many people out there listening track their usage on their phone, but it is scarier than forget watching a horror movie on Netflix. Just look at your phone and the usage. Mine's off, actually it should be off, but just look at the phone usage that you have at the end of the day. For some people, maybe it's not such a scare fest, but I track mine, and I have noticed during the pandemic, as I'm sure many have, it's gone way up. And then it was like a huge eye opener for me. So, and I even know someone who after tracking, and she saw the number of hours she was using on Instagram, and we did like a cold turkey. She just dropped off and closed her account and just took like a huge break. You can do that. I think that's one thing that you can do, is really take that kind of cold turkey break. But I would advocate more for become very aware. You can't make a decision about what's going on for you if you're not aware of how much time you're spending. So start tracking your usage. Use your phone, use your technology in a good way, track the usage. We'll talk, if we get to it, I'll be talking about employers and tracking usage of employees too, but track your usage on social media. How much are you spending? I don't think anybody should be on social media every single day. I'm just going to say it. I really don't. And on the days, maybe every other day, maybe every couple of days. And if you are using it, if you have a social media day, I would truly restrict it to, and people might freak out when I say what I'm about to say, but 20 to 25 minutes tops. And this is maybe if you're just a general consumer of social media. The same advice would not apply if you are a brand or a company or an organization that is using social media in a different way, obviously. But I think we have to become aware of how we're using it. And then the second thing I would say to this individual is, ask yourself what you're really gaining from it. Like, what is your raison d'etre, raison d'etre? Why are you on social media in the first place? Is it to contribute and add value and also obtain value, or is it for validation and a huge number, and for boredom and for clickbait and for like lighting up our, it's like sugar, right? It's like candy, like ding, 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 ding. You start scrolling and it feels yummy. Like it feels great. Ooh, look at this. Ooh, look at that. Those are less healthy reasons to be using social media. And we all are guilty of this. I've tried to myself become mindful of when am I scrolling for validation and pleasure, pain pleasure, you know, is a huge part of this, versus when am I scrolling because I actually am looking for something that could shift how I'm thinking or add some kind of value to my life or connect me to something I need to know about what's happening in the world. And similarly, when I'm posting, I actually found, so I made a switch for myself earlier in this year that I think I shared with you, Catherine, last week, which is I stopped posting adverts about even this, like I put it in the stories, but I stopped sort of posting the me, this is what I'm doing, this is the radio interview, this is what I'm working on. I stopped doing that in my personal accounts, and I just started restricting my posts to a few times a week, trying to add some kind of value through my expertise to anybody scrolling, some therapeutic value. That's what I know, psychological value. What could I say today that could help somebody who's looking at this with their life? And I also made one other decision: no kids, no kids on my my little one. I think I'm giving him a little bit more window, but he's off too shortly, and I cut the other one off. I just don't think they have the right to be there because they haven't consent. I don't have the right to put them there. It's just my personal belief. They don't know what they're consenting to, and they have no idea what the ramifications are. So just going back, why are you on social media? Ask yourself, what are you getting from it? If you're there to contribute something because you own a company, because you are someone who knows something, you don't have to be an expert, just a human, and you have something to share, be it art, be it poetry. So these are some of the nicest ways we can use it. Then by all means. But if you're using it primarily for your own self-validation, to garner likes and attention, this is a sure sign to curtail your use. And definitely measuring how you feel afterwards. I've conducted those experiments. How do I feel now? Rate myself, scale 1 out of 10. And then let me go on social media for like 30 minutes. Instagram, whatever, it doesn't matter what I'm using. I tend to use Instagram, or maybe, yeah, pretty much that's it. And how do I feel after those 30 minutes? And really ask yourself, if you're feeling lousy after using social media, it's time to step back or maybe take a break altogether. And I have to say, like, the data has shown that by and large, the vast majority of us don't feel good after using social media.
So I find this fascinating, and especially your comments about having kind of an in advance, kind of you determine how long and then sticking to that. And so you've kind of imposed this on yourself, rather than relying on the cues from the technology, because there's a reason why they design it so that you can scroll forever, right? It's not like you're reading a magazine or a book and you get to the end and it's done and you know it's time to stop and put it down and go have a snack and do something else. You could scroll forever.
That's actually what you said.
Constant reinforcement.
Totally. And well, not constant, variable.
Yes.
The key is variable, but constant, variable, intermittent. It's called intermittent, like a slot machine.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the scrolling, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's what's happening is things that I'm not an expert in algorithms or tech, but just from understanding, I understand how we respond to the tech. And then I've also done a little research on what's happening behind the scenes from a tech standpoint. There are algorithms that are designed to know when we've been abandoned our phone for too long, and then it dings up with something. Like if anyone's seen the movie In and Out, and you see those little emotions, the Disney Pixar movie of the 5 emotions sitting in the girl's head, and they're navigating her whole life. That is an analogy for what a lot of us are living in, except instead of the 5 emotions, it's Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm telling you, and they are the ones who are sitting up there in the control center. Oh, she clicked on that. Let's send her that. Let's send him that. Oh, let's see if we can, it's called an ellipse is what I've been told, so that you can see when someone's responding to you, keeps you there. They want to keep you on their page and site as much as they possibly can. And no one has really come forward to help us understand that that's the reality of what's going on, but it is. And we have drank up the Kool-Aid, all of us, myself included, because it's fun. It was fun until, I started understanding more. And I understood a long time ago just because I have that psychology background, but just also being mindful of how I feel. But it's fun. It's very pleasure inducing, and anything that's pleasure inducing in our brain, we're just going to do it over and over and over, just like the scrolling, like you said.
Okay, so I'm going to flip our discussion a little bit now and maybe focus a little bit more on the employer side, because we've been talking a fair bit about kind of our personal tech and how to manage that and how that might affect us. And so for the employers, like, what could they do to better integrate technology into their employees' lives? Like, what could they do for us? Or what can we do as employers? What can we do for our employees?
So I think that employers play a key role in this. And that is becoming, like I said, I think we've used technology in a way that initially was meant to make our lives easier, smoother, more convenient, not faster. I think speed was a byproduct of that, but I don't think speed of life was the goal. Convenience and facilitation and efficiency was the goal, not hectic, and what we've done is we've actually taken the technology efficiencies that have been provided to us early on, and just instead of allowing that to make our days easier and slower and have more vacation and more time with family and friends, which is what we could have done, we just piled on more work, and we just started saying, well, now we can do thrice the amount of work, and because of these efficiencies. So employers have to really shift that. This is a massive shift across society. I mean, this is not like an easy thing that can be accomplished overnight, but we have to change the whole zeitgeist of what it means to have our workplace culture here. There are parts of the world where it is illegal for employers to email their employees after working hours. And I think that is an incredible rule that everyone should be implementing. As an example, they are wellness centric. In the face of technology, employers need to become wellness focused, because well employees are more productive in the end, even if they're working less. Maybe they're working healthier, and therefore the profitability in theory should be the same or even more. The vacation and the time, I mean, that's something that, we're very good with things like family leave and maternity, but when it comes to vacation, we seem to fall short. We don't have enough days for people to unwind and really just shut off. And I think that this is something that, again, this is an opportunity, and I know that's another question that we'll talk about, but the efficiencies or what we think is an efficient working day or working week or working year, I think can be completely re-examined in the face of what we're going through. More vacation time, more time for people to shut off, which sounds like, well, they're going to be away from work and fall behind. But in reality, what we know is when people get that kind of time, a shutdown, they come back far more ready to tackle things. Just talking about the average day, bringing it down to the day-to-day, and going back to sort of the blurred lines, emailing outside of hours, texting even, multiple modes of communication. So, we're texting one another, we're emailing one another, we're DMing one another for work sometimes. I'm not talking necessarily about our own personal lives. So now all of a sudden you've got multiple modes of communication, which should really not happen. We need one form of communication from employer to employees, or maybe two most, electronic and telephone or video. And this idea of blurring, getting people at all hours. No one should feel the pressure to be available at all times. And yet somehow we've created a world for ourselves where we've convinced ourselves that we need to be available at all times. That's the crazy part. I gave a presentation to a big Canadian company a few weeks ago, And they do have the kind of work where when you're on, you do kind of need to be on. It's kind of like being a nurse or a doctor. If you're on call, yes, you do need to, you can't just be paged and say, well, I'll get to you in a couple of hours. You know, someone's life might be in danger. So in jobs like that, there is something to be said about, you know, having to be on. And I think you need to go into those types of professions with that idea that you're going to need to be on for that shift. But what happens when your shift is over and your nurse goes home or your doctor goes home? I didn't get my doctor when I delivered my kids, not either time, because it didn't happen that way time-wise. They left. They didn't say, well, she wants you, come back. I got the person who was next on. She's out. It's like she's not there because she wasn't there. And we do this in the healthcare profession. You know, you can't call your doctor if they're off shift, that's it. It's like they're not there. But in our corporate working life, we don't have these same rules. It's like, if you have email and if you have a phone, why shouldn't I get you? And then people have self-imposed that on themselves too. So they feed into that. They respond. You know, they respond to their employers. They make it okay. And we are teaching, it's like a feedback loop in both directions, a positive feedback loop. We begin to teach ourselves and our employers that I can be reached at all times. You can get me. During that presentation with that Canadian company, they do have the kind of situation where, you know, in their shift, they really do need to be on and they do need to respond straight away. However, I argued with this one person, or I posited to him rather, why are you responding to an email at 9 o'clock if you're done at 6 or 4 or whatever it is? And his response was, because then they know I'm dedicated to my work and I'm good at what I do. Mm-hmm. And I said, and I've shown them that I'm dedicated and I'm good at what I do. And I said, no, I actually said to him, no, the only thing you've taught them is that you can be reached at 9 o'clock. And that's it. If you're good at your job, it will show in the time that you are there on your job. If you're reliable and dependable, it will show because you can handle the requirements of the scope of your work when you're required to do it. And it was tough. It was a tough sell. And what was disheartening is that he really, for a variety of reasons, he really attached this idea of his self-worth as an employee to being available at all times. And I think that that's a behavioral shift and a mindset shift that many of us have embraced, much to our detriment.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I think we tend to kind of impose our own problems, like the employer maybe or maybe is not asking for constant availability, but then we offer it anyways.
Yes.
And then even if we're not offering the availability to do things, we still spend our off time just thinking about work. So we're still really kind of working because we're just ruminating on it. It's not rest, it's not recuperation, we're just ruminating. Yeah. And so I think ideally people will develop their own, at least psychological boundary between home and work. And I've heard any number of different strategies for this. From something I do, I will walk out the front of my door, take a little walk, and then come back. And then my work day starts. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, I go for a walk,
yes,
with my daughter, come back, and home time has started.
Yeah.
And so there's definite work time, definite home time. I know other people who will, they'll listen to a certain favorite song, either in the morning to psych themselves up and, okay, this is now work time, or at the end of the day, it's like, okay, all done, now it is home time, me time, family time, we get to do everything else. And I think unless we have these psychological boundaries, especially if you're working at your kitchen table these days, it's not going to work so well.
Yeah, working from home has actually made that simultaneously more challenging and yet easier to take breaks because we can stop, we can look at the trees outside. I have trees right over here. If I need to I can get up and stretch. I don't have to worry as much about optics. Although the fact that we should sit in an office with people and have to worry about optics in the first place is yet another problem. We shouldn't have to worry about who's watching us and looking at what we're doing if we're taking a stretch break or just kind of, but yes, it's the separation between work and really I've struggled with that. I've learned, how to, a couple times, when I've slipped and let the lines blur, and a couple times one time in particular, was taught a very valuable lesson during my PhD to make sure I separate. But we have to compartmentalize our time. And I know a lot of people listening will probably be thinking to themselves, but how? How do I do that if my boss or my employer expects me? They need the freedom and flexibility. We have to trust our workers, our staff, our teams and teach them the self-regulation skills, also maybe provide those tools, but also give them our trust and give them an environment that is focused on putting them and their wellness at the core, so that they know I can do that. I always say to people, the first thing that you do in the morning should not be, unless you're turning off your alarm. I do reach for my phone in the morning because I don't have an alarm. I had one, but then like one of those old ones, and I shut it off and I put it down, and I will not touch it for at minimum an hour, sometimes more, because I just don't want the first part of my day, if I start opening, who hasn't opened up a red, as in the color red and unread inbox full of email and felt stress and anxiety. And now all of a sudden, the first thing you're doing to start off your day is responding. You're happening to it. You're happening to the email, you're happening to life, as opposed to it's happening to you, as opposed to you happening to your life, designing the flow of the day. It still may include email, but it's a structured time that you've allotted to it. And that's the only thing you're doing in that time. And most of us aren't doing that. We're answering an email. Meanwhile, the phone is buzzing at the same time. We might have it's too much. These lines have been blurred here more than in other places. And I do think that I'm picking on us and our culture here in North America, maybe a little bit too much, but I do think that there are stark differences in the way we all have the technology. Our relationship with it is it's duly set by ourselves and our employers and the working lifestyle.
Okay, so I'm just being a little bit mindful of the time right now. And so I see there's been several interesting questions in the open chat that I also wanted to give the people who kind of pre-submitted questions a chance to have their questions heard. Mm-hmm. Now, Natasha, I think you mentioned earlier that if there are questions we don't quite get to, you'll provide some answers. So maybe if people continue to add questions, we can kind of extend the conversation beyond our webinar today, because I find the questions are so good and the comments are so rich that there won't be enough time to get through everything. So
sure.
The first question that was pre-submitted is someone is saying, I find with the use of technology, there appears to be more distance and more standardization with structure. And there are those who don't really conform to the mold. Is this the way of the future, where technology will determine how we interact with one another? And so what does the future hold? What do you think, Natasha?
I wish I could look into some kind of thing and predict it. I wish I could, or maybe not. Maybe that would actually be a curse. But I don't know. Is the short answer, because none of us actually know. None of us knew this pandemic was coming, not really, at the end of the day. So we don't know what the future will hold. I think it's safe to assume that technology is not going anywhere. And how we are using it and consuming it and what role it plays in our lives, I wonder myself. I think that there are some things that appear to be reasonably safe to assume. For example, with respect to driving and commuting, we may not be doing as much driving and commuting in the future. We may not have cell phones, smartphones, and social media. These things may, I think, because of the way that our lives have changed so radically in the span of just a year or 6 months or even 2 years or 4 years or 5 years, where this app is all of a sudden no longer relevant. I guess the relevancy of our world around us is changing at an even quicker slope. I guess there are many things that are possible. So everything that we're using the way we are today is possibly going to change in the very near future, including how we even speak and video call. I don't know. I mean, there might be things that we put into our bodies, or maybe, you know, whether we choose to do this or have to do this, or I don't know, but we might be offered options for even increased efficiencies through chip data. Again, I'm not a technology expert or anything like that, but there might be, certainly there are, I think there will continue to be advances in healthcare and even mental health care and how we use technology, and those can be very positive things. Including virtual reality, which we're already there, but also artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is something that everyone is talking about. It's already out there. We already have it. It's not like it's, we've had it for a while. I think, you know, just to go back to your question about what employers can do and how they can use technology in good ways, that's a good way, because artificial intelligence can actually do a lot of tedious, mundane things. Maybe we'll have an interesting future where we can free ourselves up for much higher level tasks while artificial intelligence and technology takes care of all the crappy things, you know, that none of us wants to do, and the administrative and all those things. However, we know that automation will also replace a lot of work. So, you know, how's this going to look? I don't know. I'd be lying if I did. I don't want to come across as negative and dire. I'm not. I do have a lot of hope and excitement for the future. I really do. But I also am a little concerned, especially raising children in you know, this environment. I do think that artificial intelligence may get to a point where if it begins to design the AI itself, then it's possible that it may take over in ways we couldn't possibly have imagined. And that could get interesting. Again, I'm not even sure if I know what I'm saying right now, but it's possible at a very extreme level that we might just be at the mercy of technology. Very worst case scenario, we might actually be controlled by technology. I hate to say that, but that's one thing. And then maybe on the other side, we might be living in a world where actually we finally made friends with it and are in a healthy relationship with technology, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. That's good food for thought. The second question, just that people had pre-submitted, is somebody is asking, how can we get more personal but at a distance? And this is related to the question that came after it about kind of how do we stay positive?
Yeah.
With everything going on, with everything you're telling us about our use of technology, kind of what hopeful thing can we hold on to?
Well, so I think we still have a huge opportunity. I think some of the things that may or may not happen haven't happened yet, number one. And we still have, by all accounts, by everyone's agreement, a huge opportunity to change the way we live and to change how we interact with this planet and technology, and to change and to design a future that is different and better. The pandemic won't last. No pandemic in the past has lasted. It's long, but it won't last forever. So I think we need to play the mental long game and remember that no matter what, even if it's long, even if 2021 ends up being a pandemic year, which I know the prospect of that is probably, you know, doesn't exactly feel good to hear, but I don't know whether it will be. But it seems there's some promising things going. Scientists are working on things. If we can choose to believe that, or we can choose to be doom and gloom, the world is ending, you know, the end of the world is here, and there's no end in sight, and this is going to, you know, change everything. We could choose to take that attitude, or we could choose to take one which is, well, no, we know scientists are working on things. We know these things don't last forever. Yes, this is hard. Yes, it's requiring me to make all kinds of changes, but look, I've done that. I'm actually stronger than I realize. I can adapt. I am resilient, and this too shall pass. And we can choose to take that mentality in the face of actually not knowing. Not knowing is actually, you know, going back to the other question, not knowing what the future is powerful, because you have the option to imagine and design a better one. And that leads to more calm, less anxious feelings, as opposed to creating a version of the future that nobody knows whether it will happen or not. So why would you pretend or suggest that you have the answer or predict the future in such a negative way? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's maybe a a more positive angle than some of what we've been talking about so far.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people live with so many day-to-day challenges that it's frustrating. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, we often don't talk much about what we're experiencing in these days. I mean, we're reacting to it. We're doing our very best. Maybe we're stronger than we think, but at the same time, it can still be very challenging. So I really appreciate your comments on kind of how to think forward in a very positive way and look to the future about what we can hold on to. So, so I'm just going to briefly touch on one or two additional questions in our very limited time that we have left.
I'll be very short with my answers.
So someone is asking, this is one of the pre-submitted questions, is it possible to reduce the amount of emails now that we are no longer dropped by anybody's office? And I'm going to kind of put this, sort of juxtapose it with one of the posted questions by Sepender Seffer, who is saying, okay, we take 5 days work week as granted. That's come from the past, right? That's been traditional, at least recently. But what if 24/7 is just a new norm? Mm-hmm. And just being conscious of our time is just going to make you be left out. Mm-hmm. So it's two very different perspectives on this. Like, how do we go in one path, or do we just run with it and take the other way? What do you think?
Well, I mean, so with respect to
in 2 minutes or less.
Okay. Email, I think, yes, I think we can. Way before this, we were emailing in the excess. We were copying people in the excess. We need to use it more intelligently. We need to really think about what we're saying, when we want to say it, and not just write an email and throw it off there simply because it's there and we can. So I think that is definitely an area, and email can be just as addictive as the social media apps. So that's certainly an area I think that not only technology can help us if we use it correctly, but we can also be more mindful about how we're using email, who we're sending to, and yeah.
Okay, I think that's probably the best spot for us to leave this for now. But I have to say,
Catherine, do you mind if I just say one more thing? Well,
probably, of course,
or less. I just want to touch on, like, you know, that idea, just for hope, you know, the idea of what we're talking about today being maybe not the easiest topic, but there's a lot we can do I'm not suggesting that we live in a miserable world, not at all. I think we're living in the best time of our lives, no question, but I think we could be living in healthier ways, and potentially where we're going could not be as healthy if we continue in this fashion. And this year sort of offers us an opportunity to really redefine what constitutes a good life, you know, and equate it less with, we all need to eat and live, as I've said before, and many times we all need that, but how much we need, I think, is become very askew for us. And we have a lot of everything. And I think we can redesign what a good life is with perhaps less of the physical, and you know, the homes, the cars, the clothes, the fashion, the shoes, all that, but more of what's quality: vacations, time off, you know, time with family and friends. So really what constitutes a good life really comes down to our relationships and our friendships and our emotional fitness. And the last thing I'm going to say is, for people who my company creates tools. Like, this is what I'm really doing with my time most of the time, is I have tools that are available for people who would like to actually have something at home. One is a journal. So it's not technology. You have to write in a book with your hand. It's a daily guided journal to help you shift that mindset to become more hopeful about the future through kindness and compassion, through reflecting on kindness. It's called the Kindness Journal. And then the 8-Hour Therapist is a kind of a tech product because you have to look at the internet or your phone, but it's online. All the sort of teachings and wisdoms of my years and my partner who created it as psychologists, kind of condensed into 8 courses that people can self-educate at home about how to become more emotionally fit, mentally fit, and achieve that balance in their life. So I want to mention those 2 things. And we need more things like that. We need tools in addition to webinars, in addition to people telling us and giving us the advice, we need things that we can do at home in the workplace that are short and effective, and that can really make a huge difference in people's lives.
That's just tremendous. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's the type of thing that people need exactly that these days. And I think it's the sort of thing that can be so useful for so many people. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Khaled, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you again, Catherine and Natasha, for being here today and sharing your insights with us. We hope you all enjoyed today's webinar. I know I did, and I learned a lot, and will try to be less of a technology addict in the future. Okay, I know this is touches on a topic of research that is actually close to what we do at the research center here, which is the dark side of technology. So technology is not always good for you, has a lot of positives, but also certainly has a negative aspects. Our next webinar is on Thursday, November 26th, and will be a discussion with Canadian broadcast personality and author Terry O'Reilly and the Groot Associate Professor Mandeep Malik. They will be discussing emotionally driven marketing in times of change. You can visit our website to learn more and register for this event. Again, I thank you all, and I wish you a great day. Bye now.